Hi, everybody. Yeah, no Wellness Wednesday slate. This is sort of a mental health thing, but it's not really a Wellness Wednesday, but it kind of is. It's about the double standards. I said I'd talk about this on Monday. The double standards facing women and facing people commenting on women in media versus women in real life. And um, this is confusing and fraught and messes with everybody's head, but it's not, I thought I'd do it today instead of on Manly Monday because this is going to be more from, the girl part of me, that 30% that's still there, maybe on a good day. One of the things, cross my arms consistently, like, oh my God, uncomfortable. One of the things that I have been most torn about is not seeing myself in women in media. And the closest I can think of recently is She-Hulk. And I know saying that makes guys' testicles suck up into their body. But hear me out. It's because she's somebody who has this, how the world sees me, how I see myself thing going on. And and this is something that's been missed in all the screaming. Ultimately, she wants a guy to be interested in her, not the way she looks, which is why I thought pairing her with Matt Murdock was so works for me. That this depiction of She-Hulk, they can't do. They got into the promiscuity from the comics, and I think that the way they threaded that needle was an indication of this is the difference between women writing a woman with multiple sexual partners and men writing a woman with multiple sexual partners. And it's not that there's anything wrong with the runs of She-Hulk in the comics. It's just different. And because guys can't understand that particular insecurity women have about their bodies from the inside. It's just, trans men can understand it because they were raised being forced into these girl boxes, right? So they understand the programming, the pressure, right? A cisgender guy, or even, a trans woman understands it as an adult, and that's certainly more than cis men get. But that experience of being raised girl-coded it's insidious and stifling, and the world fucks up boys. The world fucks up girls in a way that's very unique. Remember that thing I said on Monday about women don't voice 90% of their opinions, which is why you get a bad reaction as a man when you voice one? Because, you just went over your 10% allotment, basically, and that's a transgression in girl world. In girl world, in non-European cultures, the idea that, and in a lot of different cultures, there's, you have to drag it out of you, right? Like refusing, oh, no, it's okay. No, it's okay. Oh, if you insist, girls are taught to not have an opinion or not voice a preference until it is dragged out of them because it's selfish. And that's some people may say, yeah, that happens to boys too. And yes, increasingly, that is how boys are being socialized. But traditionally, and maybe it's sort of both, it's a mixed message facing boys now, because boys are often forced to speak strongly and with emphasis, even when they really don't care that much. It's like a performance. That's something that has driven me crazy about academic writing, that everything is just clobbering the reader, right? Instead of going, let's just explore this. The idea of state a hypothesis, test a hypothesis, has become beat the audience over the head with your hypothesis, right? Beat the reader over the head with your opinion. And it's a very masculinized way of speaking. It's a masculine trained, not the way men speak, a form of speech associated with masculinity, right? Western masculinity, because in Japan there's a quieter, like Kiryu from Yakuza, right? He doesn't need to offer his opinion. It's a very different masculine archetype. But I mean, there it's like this as well, right? That, and I think it's important to keep in mind that there is no one masculinity, and that's why it's so important to consume media from outside of a Western paradigm. There's an incredible show on Disney Plus right now. It's an Afrofuturistic series of shorts. You know, like Marvel's What If or the Matrix cartoon. It's sensory overload. It works on one level of this is just freaking cool. If you get what they're drawing from, though, it's so good. I think it's called Kizimoto Generation of Fire. It's really good. Kizai, K-I-Z in America, A-I. K-I-Z-A-I. Or K-I-Z-A-Y. I'm not good at spelling out loud. In part because I gotta do the Z or the Z. Anyway, off topic. There are different masculine constructs and there are different feminine constructs. And I talked on Monday about how freaking narrow the level of acceptability is for women. And this is where my philosophy of gender studies or gender advocacy, you can call it gender ideology if you want, differs from so many high profile people in feminism. Because I think that ultimately the goal is to expand what is appropriate and acceptable for both men and women so that people can be individuals. And you're not allowed to say that in certain circles because that sounds too much like the sort of rationalist enlightenment terminology. There was a lot of writing back then about doing things in accordance with one's nature. But of course, it was all white men. So the idea of what was natural got centered on white men. And the idea is fine. Just how narrow it the debate about what is natural and harmless and then what is aberrant, even though some people want to do it, is fraught. And with women, it's the whole, choice feminism versus class feminism thing. And it forces anybody who has a passing interest in this stuff to be an advocate as long as you're conscious and sometimes when you're not. And that's not fair because that stifles artistic expression. Art has to be able to go into things that are wrong or flawed and examine it so that we can, in a way that's safe, examine the parts of ourselves we're not yet comfortable with. We're still trying to figure out where they fit and how to integrate the various aspects of ourselves. And integration's tough, right? Because as you integrate, some parts of us sort of fuse, and you realize that, okay, these states of being that I thought were two distinct things are actually, like the heads and tails of a coin. It's one thing. All right. The more you can get the different parts of you talking to each other and working as a team, the happier, more centered, and less stressed you'll be. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, there was a lot of talk about the fragmentation of the female persona, that you hear almost nothing about anymore outside Megan Thee Stallion's Savage song. That's what she's talking about when she says ratchet, bougie, classy. It's like every woman is each of those things sometimes, and ideally we accept that, we are all these things, and you don't have to be classy all the time. And if you're bougie sometimes, you don't have to be bougie all the time. And we all have to sort of embrace, our inner ratchet, because we all have goblin mode, right? And that song, she does not get enough credit because she uses her sexuality. She does not get enough credit for what she's doing with her lyrics and the imagery she uses and the callbacks to history that she, employs. And, Nicki Minaj, before Nicki kind of got lost, same way. But Megan, she goes deep with her references, man. It's really impressive. But because of the way she presents, people don't see it. And it's like the Beyonce Rihanna thing would really never should have happened. But this is, it's the virgin whore dichotomy all over. And that virgin whore dichotomy, you're either... the virgin whore dichotomy, for people who don't know, is the reality in womanhood that if you're not totally pure, you're trash. Hence the ratchet, bougie, classy. You shouldn't have to be classy all the time, but let's face it, if you're not, you gotta be bougie all the time, or you gotta be ratchet all the time. You're not allowed to be classy sometimes and have anything else, because the minute, this is the de-pedestaling effect that happens on women, which is why saying women should be put on pedestals is not good. There's further to fall. That's what we're talking about here. But you get into games and it's fucked up. The one I keep going back to all the time of just people didn't get it. And the problem is people start judging characters by trailers. And the one I remember most distinctly is when the first Metal Gear Solid 5 trailer dropped with Quiet. And I remember you felt a bit of a thing. But I remember me looking at her and going, I rolled my eyes, but not for the same reason other people did. I rolled my eyes because she's pale in the desert sun. I call bullshit. Now, we knew nothing about the character, right? That's, with Kojima, those anachronisms are always deliberate. And that's something I wish analysts would learn. Because the thing that came out about Quiet was, oh, she's named Quiet and she doesn't speak, and look at the way she's dressed. And yes, that's a starting point. And ironically, people made the same mistake with Quiet that they did with She-Hulk, but it was different groups of people. In that, when Tony Stark or Stephen Strange is a complete asshole at the beginning of the story, Star-Lord's the same way. Just men, children, assholes. Arrogant, shitty to women, shitty to everybody. Egomaniac wrecking balls. Oh, because that's the beginning of their story. But when a woman starts in a way that makes us uncomfortable, or she does things that are antisocial, it's either, well, that's just a bad character, the show hates men. The assumption is that any depiction of women by a work of media is an endorsement of that state, not playing with the state. And the one that, again, doesn't get enough credit is Bayonetta. Because, I mean, the games after the first one weren't this solid, but the whole idea of Bayonetta is that she is the product of a forbidden union. She's the dark witch, not, she's the wicked witch of the West. The good witch is somebody else. She's inherently tainted. And her enemies are the cardinal virtues. That's deliberate. And so all the things that people complained about with, the nudity and the climax attacks, what was it? Was it kind of fan servicey? Yes, but I thought it was smart fan service in that it was challenging what's considered good in women. Because we don't see sexualized depictions of men as degrading the same way. At least not idealized, sexualized depictions of men. Some guys are, well, if you look a certain way, please stop doing that. Just, please don't. Because if you push back all the time, things aren't going to get better. Because it's how it's used, not what's used. And this is the problem with gaming getting into a tropes versus women attitude, because a trope is not against anybody. A trope is a trope. It's how it's used. Michelle Yeoh in American Born Chinese plays the goddess of compassion. And she's, Michelle Yeoh is 60. And she's depicted as this beautiful goddess. And then she's wearing sweatpants and putting together IKEA furniture. And she's having the time of her life. Like, chunky glasses, sweatpants. It's like, you can tell she's loving it because she got to be both things. And we're in a zone now where no idealized depictions of women are allowed to exist, but plenty of idealized depictions of men are. And what that means is that more states of manhood are considered good enough than women. Because if every different looking character is considered ugly when it's a woman in a bad way, we can't diversify what people see as beautiful. It's gotten to the point that if you type in beautiful woman in an AI art generator, you will get a white woman every single time. I think they're trying to fix that, but what it was fed, it's a white woman who's vaguely anime looking because it's so narrow. And it's it's an issue because with men you can look more muscular with armor, right? If you got armor on, nobody knows what you look like underneath. So power armor solves all the body problems. With women, powerful women are associated with being scantily clad. And if you do realistic armor for women, um, it's not designed to show off curves or cleavage. I mean, my big issue with Vess in The Witcher was not, I mean, it was ridiculous how much they focused on her stripy pants ass in the opening of that game. But my issue with Vess uniquely is that the sorceresses in The Witcher use glamours. So, and they have magic. Vess has no magic. She's dead from one arrow. Sorceresses can stop that shit. And their clothing literally defies gravity. That's fine. That you've explained it. But Vess, every guy in that merc unit has at least padded armor that protects the vital organs. And she's bare here. Yes, she's self-destructive, but it it is not in keeping with what she says in the game, which is she doesn't want to be treated any differently than men. Because that's how they explain her doing the Red Sonja thing with Geralt at a tournament, and that's how you get to sleep with her. And it's like, men have needs. Nobody judges them. It's like, yes, men, Vess, are also wearing armor that will actually protect your heart. It's not that she looks sexy. It's that the explanation was all over the place. Because, of course, then you sleep with her because she believes you don't treat her differently than a man. And then when she's raped by a king later in the game, you treat her differently than a man. And I was like, that angered me, because it's like the game forces you to go back on the conditions under which she consented to sex. And that's the difference between a consensual sort of casual encounter. It's not love. It's just feeling good. To false pretenses and low-key abusiveness. And that drove me nuts. But you don't hear that discussion. It's just, well, look at the way she's dressed. And I'm so sick of that. Because you can't slut shame characters in things. I mean, there was that whole thing about Joss Whedon managed to convince Elizabeth Olsen that boring ass Scarlet Witch shit was better than her iconic costume in the comics. Like, and you could tell how impressionable she is, right? And actors are. If a director tells an actor something, it automatically becomes truth in a lot of cases. And, she went from, oh, yes, I didn't have cleavage. That's good. To, or I had too much cleavage. Why is that? We need to fix that. To wearing the classic Scarlet Witch outfit as a Halloween costume. And yay! I don't blame her. Like I said, actors are malleable and impressionable. But, yeah, that's a real mixed message. And meanwhile, the Thor phenomenon. That last movie was so digital, like so digital. It was practically arcane the way everyone was painted over, and that's fine. If we all understand that we're supposed to be like these people we're depicting are gods, So, okay, it's not a regular person. We don't have to live up to that standard. There's no expectation there. And that, to me, is what the line should be in women in fictional media. One, are we truly showing the spectrum of what actual humans consider beautiful? Because what actual humans consider beautiful is not just skinny white girls under the age of 25. People like a broader range than that. And when gaming was allowed to just self-police, we ended up with, okay, some of this was palette swaps in Mortal Kombat, but we have Tanya, who's, I forget what Tanya's supposed to be. Is she Latin coded? Is she Middle Eastern? But then you got Jade, and then you got Kitana, who's, increasingly, they play up her Asian features. Um, you know, when it's, and that, they did that way before anyone was forced to. Mortal Kombat was the no good, very bad game up there with Doom back in 93 through 96. That was, the hearings that brought in the ESRB. So it didn't get government regulated. Lara Croft was originally named Lara Cruz, as in Cruz or Z. Cruz, Latin last name. She was based on, Tank Girl Nina Cherry, who was a singer at the time, who's mixed race. And yes, okay, the polygon count back then, I really do think it was different because you couldn't make characters look human, so who cared if you gave them kind of bizarre proportions? It was just polygons, like, chill. There's also a dinosaur in the game. It's not real. But this assumption that games must reflect real life, that it must be representation, does not apply to men. Nobody complains when a guy has pectoral muscles the size of a human head, is 9 feet tall, has a 12-pack. I remember this. I don't remember if it was Rob Liefeld who drew it, or it was just the Rob Liefeld era. But there's a Namor cover where he literally has like too many abdominal muscles. Like, it's called this 6-pack for a reason. It's 3 segments. And most men's abs are not symmetrical. The muscles are actually interwoven, and symmetry is a big deal in bodybuilding. But if you look real hard at a lot of, competitive athletes and things like that, it's not symmetrical, and it's not gonna be. And we don't talk about these when it's, the guys who play games do not look like the guys who are in games. If it did, gaming would look like the cast of Alan Wake, right? With Alan and Barry, and then play Alan Wake before. I think it's free if you've got a subscription like Game Pass or PS Plus. There's an enhanced edition or something like that. But, you don't tend to get men in games who look like the guys who play games. Occasionally you get a game like Heavy Rain or something like that, right? But we don't talk about how bad that is because, we're going against a larger cultural backdrop. And I've always believed that let's expand what we present as beautiful in games, as opposed to no, has to look like a real person. And to me, one of the greatest examples of that in games is The Legend of Zelda. I'm playing Tears of the Kingdom right now, and you've got the Gerudo women who, were very curvy and scantily clad, but they live in a desert climate. But they're darker skinned, but they've got like red hair. That's not a combination you see in nature. Trust me. This is me after getting sun. Okay? This is the darkest I get. Um I had to use self tanner when I was on television, and that stuff is fucking awful. And yeah, I didn't do it by choice. I had to because of the way things were lit. Talk about normalizing beauty standards. Like, fuck it. They used to tell it was me and then one other lady, her name was Rachel Perry, kept getting told to get a tan. Uh, but then you've got Zelda, who's blonde in this game, which is Zelda goes back and forth because different Zeldas. But then you've got a whole bunch of different like the different scientist girls who were kind of cute. I'm like, yeah, they're working for me. And then you got the great fairies, who are, from where I come from, Zuftig, like full figured. And they're the most physical sexual characters in the whole game. They're BBWs, man. They curvy. And they're like wearing more jewelry than actual clothes. That's the way to do it. So everything, every statement about what's beautiful isn't resting on the shoulders of one character. And enough with making the playable character the most important thing in a game. It's not, that's not how it works. Stop calling it a protagonist. That's a literary term. That's not how games work. What does the protagonist of Far Cry 3 look like? What does Vas Montenegro look like? You see what I mean? The box art character for a lot of games is not the protagonist. And that's very different than a lot of movies. You tend to put the lead on the poster, right? Whereas in novels as well, Moby Dick is not the main character, Moby Dick, and Dracula is not the point of view character or even the main character of the novel Dracula. It's Jonathan Harker, you know? And Frankenstein is not the monster. It's the doctor. But if we look at this stuff with actual rigor, not just picky choosing, having an emotional reaction, then coming up with a theory to justify it, we get very different analysis than what we've still been getting in games with the freaking out about, oh, this was so stupid on social media, whether the playable character in Fable is hot. You could make your guy get fat, like gross fat, not pleasant, you know. There's something too sometimes, guy with a tummy, you know, like nothing wrong with that. Sometimes that can work. But you like rolls, right? And Hannah, in Fable 2, the old lady with the big hammer, she was pretty big, like, but the main character in Fable has always been sort of goofy. Almost like a Monty Python character, or like, you know, not buff when it was the guy. So the fact that people lost their shit because they created a female equivalent to what is a pretty standard formula for a playable character in a Fable game. You know, people are forgetting what Fable was before they went to that shitty pre-built character multiplayer horse shit. But, you know, the cool looking characters are people like Whisper, you know, not the hero or whatever you wanted to call him. I liked setting my manner of address to Arseface. It was that kind of game. You know, Chicken Chaser was another thing. But people like, she's not hot. Roar! And to me, and I am not sure, so I am testing this theory. That is not so much about what guys want from women in real life, because I know some of the guys who go at this stuff. They would be happy if a girl talked to them. I don't think that's what it's about. And if I'm right, everything has been handled wrong. I think that rather than this idea that we need boobies and butts and narrow waists because it's comforting, I think guys are, they separate, right? Men don't expect heroic media to represent them, which is what I learned from She-Hulk, because I'm like, why would a guy recognize himself or relate to the shitbags that are there and gone, that I don't even remember their names, as opposed to Daredevil, I'm blanking on the dude's name, the friend, or like the poop bathroom guy. He's a keeper. Like, why? Because guys put themselves as a bystander in heroic media and superhero media. They do not see themselves in Master Chief, Kratos, which was mind-blowing to me, because Kratos is me on screen to me. To the point that there's a video still on YouTube of me dressed as with the Kratos makeup and everything like that. Reasonable facsimile. It was for Lady Bits. The crowdfund, yes. I'm like, that's me. That's me on screen. A lot of guy gamers don't do that. And I think maybe the make women look like us is hitting some button in, because guys don't have this have the same emotional vocabulary. It's coming out wrong. But if guys are made to think about how they stack up to your standard male heroes in gaming, that's gonna feel bad. Like, that comparison doesn't go too well for the average guy. And guys play games to not think about that. And I know one of the enjoyment I have in playing male characters, except Kratos, who is me, is that I get away from the burdens of being recognized as a woman. So if I can make choices in an RPG and be rewarded for my natural, somewhat aggressive instinct, instead of, the nice thing that we're expected to nice with a side of nice in the real world. Nice doesn't get shit done. But that's why it's so great to be kind of rewarded for my natural inclination. It's escaping reality. It's not reflecting reality. Oh my fucking God. We do not want games that reflect reality for the average woman. Oh God, it would be the most depressing fucking thing. But, maybe the reality for the average guy is kind of depressing too, which is why we don't do it and they don't expect it. But what do you think? Is this something underlying the debate that we have missed in the discussions of this? I'm interested in what you think. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. If you like this, please kick me a few bucks, either via Patreon or coffee.com or ko-fi.com/Leanna K to buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, who are working through some of these issues. Really interested in your thoughts. Maybe there's an ongoing discussion about this stuff, like spotlighting male characters and showing, no, this is not reality. Anyway, thanks for watching.